Hi, this is Scott Schilling, and I'm your host for the Focus on the Five podcast. I'm an executive coach, an international trainer and speaker, and the coach for Focus on the Five. Now, before we get to our guests here today, I want to probably answer a question you're thinking, what the heck is a 5%er? Well, they're the out-of-the-box thinkers, the entrepreneurs, the early adopters, the true disruptors, those founders, the visionaries, the inventors, and the risk takers. They're the people who go up and beyond because they're just kind of wired that way. And we're going to explore that today with a not only the founder of Focus on the Five, Ken Coleman. Ken, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Also with our host here at Real News PR podcast headquarters, the fabulous Jeff Crilley.
And I'm thrilled to be the first. There's only one first.
Right?
You
should be the first.
You should be the first. Well, the reason we brought the Focus on the Five podcast here is because you are the first doing what you're doing here with Real News PR. You and I have been friends for quite some time, but it was really evident to me that we needed to be based with the best, and that's why we're here with you. How'd this all start?
It actually started with this book. Can I give a shameless plug?
Absolutely.
You're going to not if I say no.
Available at all major bookstores. So no, I wrote
this
a book.
What's the name of that book? Not book, everybody's listening to your...
Okay. The book is called Free Publicity. A TV reporter shares the secrets for getting covered on the news. And I never intended to leave TV news. I was a television broadcaster for 25 years, the last 15 in Dallas at Fox 4. I was just this was my side hustle. I was running around, and that's how you and I met.
That's right.
When you're busy speaking, I was speaking 300 times a year for 6 straight years.
Wow.
So it was like a breakfast speech, lunch speech, go to work at Fox 4. Breakfast speech, lunch speech, go to work at Fox 4. And I was doing it the hard way. It was like Jerry Seinfeld in the early days doing 2 comedy shows a night, right, at the Improv. But you learn how to speak when you're doing it that often. Sure. And a business was born because as I'm signing people's books, they're saying, well, I could buy your little $10 book, but I don't have time to do any of this stuff. Could I just hire you, Jeff? And I'd say, no, you can't hire me. That's unethical. I'm on TV. I'll just tell you what to do for free. They'd say, all right, tell me what to do for free. I'd say, what are you trying to promote? They would tell me. I'd say, oh, that's easy. There's a writer at the Dallas Morning News named Cheryl Hall. She would love stories like yours. Call her up, tell her this, and this. That's your angle, and you'll get in the paper. And 2 or 3 days later, they'd call me up on a Sunday, and they'd say, Jeff Crilley, you're a genius. Do you get the Sunday Dallas Morning News? Go out in your driveway, look at the front page of the Sunday Dallas Morning News, and see whose face you see. And I saw somebody that I had given free advice to a few days earlier, and I said, you know what? Some PR firm would have gotten paid a lot of money for that, and it wasn't me. And so in 2008, at the ripe old age of 45, I got my wife's permission to quit. It's always good to get your wife's permission.
Smart guy.
That's not the forgiveness time?
That's not that. Whoops. So I started this in my home in 2008, just me, a laptop and a cell phone, calling myself a PR firm. And now I wake up and I've got 20 full-time employees, and 18 of them came from newsrooms.
Yeah. Ken, sounds kind of like the 5%er mentality there, doesn't it? A little bit of the outside-the-box thinking.
I'd say cut the cloth, especially in the media world. I mean, it's such an incredible story, and I've had a chance to get to hear it a little more in depth, but it's very impressive, and you've done it from the ground up, and I'm so excited for you and where it's going, and we're just thrilled to be able to be a part of your growth.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really exciting to have the podcast here and really see again, you and I have known each other for a long time, and I've seen it from a single studio. There's big quote marks around that studio, right?
Right. It was a small little studio upstairs in this building.
Yeah, small little studio to what's grown into a really humming, awesome organization and operation to really share. Podcast obviously is audio, but we're also being recorded, which is why you had the shameless plug for Free Publicity, the book that's available at Amazon.
that the way that works?
Yes.
So you also were able to hold up the book because you're also have brought in the other modalities. How did it all come together?
So it was a complete God thing. I mean, my daughter comes to me maybe 3 years ago, and we were still up in Tower 2 on the 5th floor, and nobody knew it. And she says, "Daddy, we need to start a podcast division." And she's now my vice president. And so I said, "Sarah, a podcast division? Like who listens to podcasts?" She says, "My generation." Like all those young people jogging on the Katy Trail with earbuds, they're not listening to music, Dad. They're listening to podcasts. And I said, "Okay, here's my credit card. Don't go crazy." So she went out and she bought a little board, and we had a few mics, and then I think we added some little GoPros. And as I'm giving my tour upstairs, I give tours all day, and I say, "Hey, we can get you on Fox News. We can get you on CNN." And they say, "Ooh, you got a radio studio?" I said, yeah, we got a little radio studio. I can get you on Fox News. I can, and then they're like, no, cool. Let me see how this works. And they put on headphones, and they're like, "This is really cool."
Yeah.
And I suddenly realized, I said, this is kind of the glittery, shiny thing that people are attracted
Shiny
to.
object, sure.
And I said, wow. And we started to outgrow that space. And so I said to myself, "Okay, Jeff, you're a marketing guy, but you're doing a lousy job marketing to your neighborhood. Everybody, we're at Lincoln Center, LBJ and the Tollway, and everybody in these towers can afford your services. Why don't you come downstairs in a big splashy way, build the Today Show in their lobby, and basically wave to everybody, come talk to us. We've got TV stations here."
Smart.
And so about 5,000 people come to work every day at Lincoln Center. So it's a little town that we're the television station for. And one studio downstairs turned into 2 studios, turned into 3 studios, and now we're building 4 other studios in another tower here in the building.
So tell us a little bit about that new tower.
Well, you're going to see it. You're going to see it
how cool.
right after the show, where I'm going to take you over there so you can see it. But it overlooks LBJ on one side and the Tollway on the other. So the background is a beautiful traffic background. And there's a lot of flexibility. You'll see we've put in one studio is large enough to fit a studio audience. So it's kind of we've got an Oprah couch there, and some monitors that you can roll in and roll out. We've got one that's kind of a cooking scene, so that if a celebrity chef wanted to come in and do a show, they could do a show. We've got another one that is kind of homey, a little bit more like The View. And another kind of traditional anchor studio that has both backdrops of LBJ and the Tollway in the background. And I'm excited. I'm smiling like a kid. Because I'm 56, and I feel like, man, I'm just getting started.
It's really exciting, and we are honored to be the only show at your facility. Or not.
I got to brag here for a minute, because it's just popped in my head. I had lunch just a few minutes ago with a guy that he said, "Now, where are you headed?" And I told him, and I was interviewing him because he's writing a book for Focus on the Five. And he said, he goes, "Right now it's all about podcasts, Ken." And I said, "Oh, really?" And he goes, "Yeah." He said, "I mean, there's no point in writing a book if it's not tied into a podcast." And I said, "Well, what if I told you that we were hooked up with one of the best in the country?" And he said, "Oh, really? Who is that?" And I said, "Well, have you ever heard of Jeff Crilley?" He goes, his eyes got real big, and he goes, "No kidding." He said, "I've been in his studios." He said, "They're amazing." Yeah. He said, "They're the nicest studios," he said, "probably in the Midwest." And I said, "That's no exaggeration."
What's so amazing to me is because they're, as a coach and a speaker and a trainer, I've been wooed by a number of people to look at a number of studios and different things. And what people call studios are a table with a couple mics and maybe a little bit of something, but you really have built an image. And one of the things I talk about in training all the time is how many times do you have the opportunity to make a first impression, and the impression that comes through. Quite frankly, one of the reasons we're here is the impression that you've built here at Real News PR is really something. I mean, where'd that all come from?
So I'm my wife at a certain point in her career, she was a television reporter. She got to interview Hollywood stars, and she became a hotel snob. And she would go to the Four Seasons and get to interview Hollywood stars like Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. And every once in a while, she'd bring me along. And I started to notice, I call it the Four Seasons treatment. It's not that the beds are all that more softer than the La Quinta, but it's how they make you feel when you come in. Right. They're greeting you, and you know, at the DoubleTree,
it's the presentation.
They give you warm cookies at the DoubleTree, right? And so I'm all about kind of the customer experience, and especially in this industry where podcasting, I think, in general is done poorly. It's a bad mic and a cheap computer in a hollow room with echoes. And so I know I've been invited on podcasts before where I actually turned them down. I just said, hey, I'm busy, I'd love to. But in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, who's listening to your podcast? It's you and your mom, right? So I said, if that's kind of the knock on podcasting, why don't I just bring television production values to podcasting, like Channel 8, Channel 4 production value to podcasters? And since my entire team came from TV and radio, I was like, we could do this. And the dream is that people who are doing podcasting right now, they don't want to do the technical stuff. They just want to be the talent. They want to do the interviews. And many of them that I'm talking to are, oh my God, thank God you're here, because now I don't have to spend another hour after the show editing and writing tags on Facebook. And so the dream is you come in here, you get greeted at the front door, you are offered Perrier water and Godiva chocolates, and they usher you in, and you sit down, and you have a wonderful producer who just makes everything happen, and then you're able to sign off and go on your way.
Well, I think what's fascinating about it too, it really is the outside the box thinking, the visionary of it. You've taken this from, and again, I have friends who were with you early, and actually went elsewhere because of price, right, and you kind of listen to there's a combination of value and feel and everything here that's significantly different, I believe. I'm fortunate to be able to do, again, through coaching and speaking and training, I get asked to do quite a few shows, and it is absolutely amazing how the quality of some is not good.
Right.
It's probably the best way to. I'm trying to say it nicely, on the fly here, and everything here is top quality, great people. Everybody's very helpful. It makes disseminating the message. It really allows Ken and I, with Focus on the Five, to allow us to focus on the message.
Yes.
Yeah. Our first experience, our first podcast was done here the other day, and we literally, by the producer, he said, I'll have this, back out to you here shortly. I mean, literally within hours, we had a finished product sent to us.
Thank you.
And that's amazing.
Well, I'm glad you're doing it in this studio, because there's something, to me, what I love about this studio is the quality of the audio.
Yes.
You will never hear yourself this crisp in the real world. I mean, you sound better. And then I find, I don't know about you guys, you kind of get in a hypnotic trance as you're talking to
I actually like
subject.
my voice, and normally I don't like it at all.
Right?
Yeah.
And you can get real low.
Yeah,
that's right.
I like it.
You're listening to smooth jazz.
So Jeff, I got a question for you. This is kind of changing something a little bit, but not much. At what point in your life did you realize that you're not your average guy? In other words, when did you know that you were born to become a part of something bigger than yourself?
So I excel at everything I do. I really, my role model's my dad. He was a minister in downtown Detroit, leading a congregation 1 year after the race riots in Detroit. He moved there in '69, so the race riots were in '68, and he's trying to kind of heal a community. And I remember as a boy coming down the stairs, and there's Dad working. He's got his coffee on, and it's kind of a early to rise mentality. And even today, I get up at 4 a.m. to begin my day. I put out an email that goes out to 28,000 journalists across the country, and it's something I've been doing faithfully for more than a decade. I haven't missed a single day, not Christmas Day, not New Year's Day.
Well, one of the things that I noticed about you right away is you surround yourself with what I call 5%ers, what the book talks about. You have a group of 5%ers, right? Which, I find that a lot of founders and CEOs and owners of companies don't necessarily surround themselves with that mentality because they're not willing to let somebody else be the chief idea person. But that's blew me away when I saw that almost everybody in your team is that type of person.
Well, so when you hire from news, there's a certain mentality. You know, I used to get into work at 2, and I was live at 5 at the airport with a complete package, right? So there's no time for waiting. You just come in and you kick in the door like a SWAT team. And so I've surrounded myself with all this incredible talent from radio and television that have the same mentality. And I love
shows.
Well, thank you. I love to own the company. I hate to run the company. And so I wisely. My daughter came into the company, well, she says she came into the company when she was 11 because she was doing some data entry work for me when I was out promoting my book. But she came in earnest when she was 22, and she's now about to turn 30. And I've watched her grow to the point where I could make her vice president. And that frees me up to do the stuff that I love to do. I mean, today, this is, I did my show at noon today, and now I'm talking to you guys, and I had lunch. And that's been my day so far. And I'm like, I got a blessed life if the company can kind of run.
But your willingness to allow that to happen. So, you know, one of the things that I hear is I've been traveling across the country and talking about the Focus on the 5 movement itself. Is rarely do you meet somebody who's a 1%er such as yourself that says, hey, you know what, I'm okay with surrounding myself with people. I mean, being open for your daughter is an example to suggest and the idea of podcast and you handing her your credit card and saying, well, let's try it out. I mean, that's that willingness to think outside that box is so apparent in your company.
Thank you.
So it really, to me, that is one of your greatest offerings is your people that you have associated with your company.
Well, and they innovate, and they, you know, I'm giving the tour all day long. I'm giving tours,
sure, yeah.
And I'm showing off. And sometimes I'll come downstairs. We have two floors here at Lincoln Center, and I'll come downstairs and I'll see a logo for a show that I didn't know existed. And I'll have to like whisper to one of the producers, so when did we start that show? And so I'm not in on every decision that happens here. And the company is now, every owner's dream is that the company lives on without them. And I can honestly say maybe 5 years ago, if I was hit by a bus, the company probably closes.
Yeah.
I think if I'm hit by a bus today, company, they have a kumbaya moment where they say, let's do this.
I don't think
that's because of the quality of the treatment here. It's a little inside joke there.
You can tell these two guys know each other pretty well.
But no, I think the company lives on without me. I'm part of an organization called EO. It's Entrepreneurs Organization, and we go on these week-long retreats. And I told my daughter on this last retreat, I said, hey, please don't call me unless something's burning down. And not a single phone call.
Nice.
During that week.
Well, I met her. She's a 1%er also.
Thank you.
You're very blessed to have that as the person to run the company.
I made the joke earlier that we're the only show here. We're far and away not the only show here. How many shows are now based out of here, just pounding it across many, many distribution locations as well?
75 shows, and to take you back when you were upstairs seeing our original studio, we were doing roughly 5 shows, and when we moved downstairs, it just started to grow. And as the head of this company, I said to myself, I've never seen a division just kind of take off like this one is. And what's happening is the guests are becoming hosts. So
right.
on a typical day, we're doing 7 or 8 live shows. And so people will come in and the guest will say, so how does this work? Do you rent this studio, or what is this place?
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, the guest is getting a tour, and sometimes the guest becomes the host.
Yeah. Well, that's, I mean, you can't not talk about the place after you've been here.
Thank you.
And, but again, I keep going back to the people. You know, it's, when you're a 5%er or you're a person who is innovative and you enter that innovative atmosphere, you can feel it instantaneously. It's like a vacuum. And so the very first time I came through and I met the people, and you were so gracious to introduce me. You didn't really know me. You just started to bring me through, and you were very proud of your company. And
thank you.
But the thing is that your people, your staff knows that. They sense that. They know that you're proud of them.
Thank you.
And that speaks volumes for, you know, you joke about us feel like we're the only company because he makes us feel that way. Makes us feel like
Yeah.
that the whole staff makes us feel like that we are the one.
Well, it's been such a welcoming opportunity, and we've been wanting to do more, faster, sooner, bigger, better, but the plan and timing are perfect. That it all happens exactly as it's supposed to happen, and we appreciate you building those studios just for us. So,
Well, can I?
That's an assumption close, by the way. If you'd like to.
So we have a saying in the office. It's hashtag secretariat, and so let me explain that. So I get up every morning to begin my day, and I'm looking at this day in history, and this is a while back, maybe about a year ago. I see Secretariat wins the Belmont to win the Triple Crown, and I'm familiar with the movie, and I'm familiar that Secretariat
Great movie.
won by a large lead. But I put on this documentary. It was a ESPN documentary on Secretariat, and they really did a great job talking about that day where Secretariat had a lead and kept expanding on the lead. And I found myself weeping as I'm watching this documentary. And I said to myself, that's what I need to do. We've already got a lead in the podcast world.
Sure.
This is not a time to coast. This is a time to expand that lead.
Yeah,
and so, like last night, one of our clients was on national TV. Yeah, and so they were on national TV, and within 5 minutes, the clip was being turned around and posted on Facebook for the client to see.
Yeah.
And it hit my phone, and it was Chris from my team doing it.
That's incredible.
And I just texted him and my daughter, and I said, "Hey, Chris, thanks for that Secretariat moment just now. That was amazing."
Yeah. Well, again, I think that so many people, again, being in the, let me just section off into the speaking business, right? People are sitting there saying, here's how you become known, and here's what you do. And it kind of many times gets tricked up, right? Well, you got to have a podcast. I mean, becomes a throwaway statement, right? And so what do you need for a podcast? Well, you need a mic and a computer. That's not really a podcast. I mean, it's a mic and a computer with you talking into it with what's really behind it and where you're going with it, which is actually why I want to talk to you about some other things that have come up as I was talking to Ken about after speaking in Phoenix last weekend. I met he's not a 5%er. I mean, he's a 0.5%er.
Wow.
I mean, he is so in the top of the top, and yet has none of this kind of presence. Still has been able to accomplish all that. Just think if you add this kind of presence with it. That'd be almost a Secretariat moment too, wouldn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Well, the blessing to me, for all those years of doing television news, I had the privilege of telling people stories. It occurred to me with this, broadcast division, I'm giving people a chance to tell their own story and shine a light on other people, as you are doing with your broadcast. I mean, my prediction for you guys is you're going to benefit more than the guest does, because you're going to be learning from these brilliant people that will be in this studio.
Absolutely.
And I love what's happening here. I mean, we kind of forget that we're on the news, we're on TV, and we're just having a great conversation, and you guys make it look easy.
Well, it's fun when you're talking about, I think the one common thing of the 5%ers, not only are they the outlier, the disruptor, but they're not doing that for them necessarily, right?
Right.
They're doing it for who they can positively impact to lay that groundwork, right, that they can follow along.
Yeah, that's it's about the movement, which I appreciate the fact, because I had talked to a lot of companies before we talked to Jeff, and the fact that Jeff got it in a matter of seconds. He understood what the 5%er was. He understood and grasped quickly about the movement and the necessity of it. He also understood that it was a God thing, and I explained that to him, and he related to that instantaneously. So I believe the listeners that will listen to this podcast that are getting ready to become a part of something much, much bigger than themselves. And I appreciate the fact that you get that, Jeff, and that you're a part of this, and you're helping us to get the message out, because it means a lot to me, and I know it'll mean a lot to the people in the future. Because there's small kids out there being born all over the world right now that are 5%ers that need help. And so this is about getting the message out to help them.
Well, I think that's the the thing that's available to all of us. It's having the desire. Just before the podcast, I came from an event where I was speaking to a group, and I said that the key to it is you got to have want to.
Yeah,
you can teach the nuts and bolts. You can teach a lot of different stuff, but
desire.
If you don't have want to,
sure,
you can't teach want to. And I think internally, it's the 5%er that just has that level of want to.
Yeah, it's like I tell people, I said, it's a DNA thing to be born as a 5%er, and it's hard you can't recognize it. You can't look across the street and say, well, that guy's got 5%er. If you're tall, you recognize that a person's tall really quick. But, you can be tall and not be an NBA player, but it's hard to be an NBA player and not be tall.
Yeah.
So
very true.
And Jeff has proven that. I mean, he's at that level. And, the thing is that he's taking it to the next level, and it's clear that he's doing that.
Yeah. So where are you going next? I mean, okay, the 4 studios are already done. That's
so
yesterday's.
tell us the secret sauce.
That's
What's
yesterday's
coming?
news.
So I guess the big dream would be one of these studios in every major market, because the next logical step would be Houston and Austin and San Antonio.
Sure.
They all need something like this.
Sure.
I'm not a control freak. I'm a quality freak, and so I couldn't. I mean, it'd be easy to just launch one in Houston right now, but I would have to have the right personnel.
Sure.
Somebody who can not only know the technical ins and outs of running a studio, but also be a salesperson who's going to give the tours in Houston.
Sure.
And I wouldn't want to be the guy in Dallas wondering, what is my guy in Houston doing?
Change your brand.
Yeah, how come we're not selling shows? So I've kind of done the thought process on this. If any of my employees said, hey, I'm going to relocate in Houston or Austin or San Antonio, I'd probably say, hey, maybe you open up the studios.
Well, it's such a great.
Good. I like it.
It's such a great vision. I mean, I think that the one thing that has to happen, I don't think we're lacking people who have a desire to serve. I think we're lacking people who are having a desire to serve, aligning with the outlets, and recognizing the possibilities and getting the message out. So I think this becomes a very pivotal cog in the wheel to give somebody that possibility.
Absolutely.
Whether they take it or not that becomes up to them. So how do you get them to take it?
That's a good question.
Can
I ask you guys a question before the show ends?
No, you can't duck my question.
If you're listening to the broadcast right now and you're not a 5%er, can you make yourself a 5%er?
Sure you can. All things, I think, come from the 5%er. The 5%er is that natural-born leader. That's that person that has the DNA. But, the reality is that they're the influencer to motivate the next generation of 5%ers as well. So, as an example, overachievers it's really about choices. That's what the 5%er movement's about. It's about how we make choices, the pattern of how we make choices. Well, there's one thing to sit around the table like this and say, well, let's talk about it. But you can always spot the 5%er. They're the ones that said, well, what happened to Bob?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Bob was here a minute ago. What happened to him? Well, Bob's out taking action on what we're all sitting here talking about.
Yes.
That's the difference between. And so, but the influencer, the ones that make choices, are the ones who says, I can make a choice without having to ask someone else's permission.
Yes.
It's about that individual, and that usually comes from a DNA thing. So I'll give an example. My son, who works with Dell Computers, he's a CEO mentality. He was born conservative-minded. Very conservative-minded individual. He loves the fact that he's very organized and he's very methodical and he makes choices through doing research and homework and all. But the reality is that he still has to be able to make a decision and make a choice. And he'll be the first to tell you that because he was influenced by a father who is an extreme 5%er, he learned that you've got to make choices in life to move forward, even as a conservative-minded individual. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So he become a 5%er of his category.
Right.
We call that the 30%er category. And then that 30%er category, he's the 5%er of the 30%er. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I think that's the biggest key. I think far too often, in whether it be in training or coaching, or you try to take somebody who's a 70% total potential and you try to make them 100%, but they've never had that to begin with.
That's right.
Getting 100% of the 70% is what's really important.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's spot on to what Focus on the Five is about.
Right.
Yeah, it's really about getting people to live fulfilled to their highest potential and where they want to go with that.
Right. Well, if I remember, you made me remember the Steve Jobs movie that came out a few years ago. In the early days, he was kind of a drifter, right?
Yeah,
He wasn't really doing anything, spectacular. And then the fire.
The light bulb went off.
Yep.
So what makes that light bulb go off is the question, right? To the listeners listening out there right now. What makes them... Well, I think that is a combination of things, but it goes back to choices. He made a choice at some point to say, okay, I'm going to go after the brass ring. I'm going to go make it happen. I have it within me.
Right.
So at some point, somebody, an influencer, showed him that he has the ability. You had a father who exposed you to that, and that influencer said, and if you've got that drive, then of course the potential's there. If I say you can be tall, it doesn't mean you're going to be an NBA player.
I think that's the interesting thing is where does the influence come from? My dad, great guy, worked for the same company for 46 years, 17 to 63 when he retired. Gave it everything he had, but wasn't. I would say he was more of that analytical, that that 30%er. So where did it come from? For me, a lot of it was athletics and seeing and being around the coaches and the impressions that were laid on me. And it's funny, you just do things differently. It's
the one thing that all three of us have in common, and it's what all 5%ers have in common, is that they're faith-based.
Yeah.
All, and that's a bold statement to make. But here's the thing, they believe that there's something out there in the world that's greater than themselves, that they can fall back on.
Yes.
So they're willing to take the outside-the-box risk and chances because they know that ultimately there's something there that keeps a watchful eye on them. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Well, by definition, faith is belief in the unseen, assurance of the unknown. There's not a single person that would be in business without faith. There's never an assurance anybody will walk in your door. There's never a belief or the circumstance for a fact that somebody will buy something from you. But you have to have faith to be in business. You have to have faith to take those actions. Now,
So what you're saying is just to strengthen your actions, strengthen your faith.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's truly, by the way, that's also the definition for fear, is belief in the unseen, assurance of the unknown. One is belief in the negative, one is belief in the positive.
Now you guys know why he's our coach.
The fact of the matter is that a 5%er has got belief in the positive and strengthens his faith. It's not for us to determine what your faith is. It's for us to be the living example of our faith. It's for us to encourage you to have faith, because there's no doubt that if you're listening to this, the fact is the 5%er is the person who is probably looking outward to make positive changes, positive improvements on the planet, period.
Well, a good example of that is this show. I mean, the whole point of the movement is to recommend the best to other 5%ers who can make the difference. Well, we're endorsing this company, Real News PR. I mean, they are the best at what they do. So, we want to send that message out to people, and we want to do that over and over and over again with other proven companies. So that's really what the movement's about. So if you're one of those companies, you're one of those type people, we want to hear from you. We want you to reach out and we want to have you here and talk to you. That's
why it's called the 5%er movement, not the 5%er static.
Yeah, that's right.
This has been
right.
This has been a great show,
and
thank you for all the kind words.
Well, thank you for being here and allowing us to interview you. It's appreciated.
Yeah, Jeff, we need to wrap it up, but we could do this forever, and we probably will after this all shuts down. But until next time, I'm Scott Schilling. I'm your host here at Focus on the 5 podcast. Join us next time. Be the 5%er that you're born to be. God bless. See you soon.
God bless.